Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome. Coming at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in from the Bhakti Center. My name is Dal Guranga, and I am here with Kishore Chandra. Jyoti Gopi is still out there this week with some throat issues. But we're glad that you're all here. And how are we doing today?
We're doing great.
We're doing great. Good to know. All right. What else is going on?
I woke up early this morning. I gave Bhagavatam class for the Bhakti Center.
Nice.
And waking up early, it's great.
It does something.
It really does something. I really don't like doing it, but when I do it, I'm like, oh, I'm awake.
Yeah, I'm awake and it's good.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Appreciate you checking in with us. Wake up early. See you next time. No. Which it is early for some people, depending on where they're tuning in. So we have a live audience. I don't think there's anybody here from the West Coast, though.
Isn't Kimberly from the West Coast?
Yeah, but she's on the East Coast now.
Oh, wait, where is she? I thought you said Portland.
Oh, she's in Florida. She's been
Oh,
on a road trip this whole week.
oh my God. I knew she was on a road trip, Florida. Oh, okay. Oh,
She
hello.
wasn't going on a road trip to Portland. She's on a road trip. Was in
Okay.
Texas, was in Alabama. Now she's in Florida. She's moving to Florida. She's relocated.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
and our other West Coasters. Stephanie's here from we got some people that aren't quite West Coast, but we got further out west. Got some Texas representatives, but nobody on the West Coast. So, anyways, Hare Krishna. Should we dive into it? Where are we diving into? We're reading Bhagavad Gita. We left off on verse
22.
22. Is that where we left off to? Okay. Oh, Krishna, excuse me. O son of Pritha, Arjuna, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, me, capital M, Krishna speaking. Nor am I in want of anything, nor have I in need to obtain anything, and yet I'm engaged in prescribed duties. Next verse. For if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I'd be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. This is going to be the next one. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. I got something to say, but I want to hear from you. I read just a bunch of verses together because I thought they went together.
Yeah, they definitely go together. I think the main thing here, or at least the thing, and I can speak more about this because I know you have something on your mind, is just that Krishna is not above doing the work. Krishna is not above doing the stuff that needs to get done for the betterment of society, of humanity, to set the example. We've been talking about setting the example. The last two verses we read yesterday were about people in power or in leadership and setting standards by their actions. And so Krishna here is even saying, like, me, Krishna, I, God, am not above doing these actions. And I like this last verse too, and I'm sure I'll have more to say about it in a moment, but I like how he kind of juxtaposes the ignorant and the learned, that like you can be doing the same thing, but again, coming back to this karma yoga point of with attachments to the results or without attachments to the results, and how that kind of differentiates the two. Yeah.
What I was getting was that sometimes the best thing you can really do for anybody is just set a good example. And I think that sometimes we get over fixated on changing other people or something we learn something or adopt a new habit or have a new perspective or change our life in a certain way, and we feel like other people now need to adopt or change in the same way, or we start seeing the ways in which other people are doing life wrong or wanting, for their own good or for the good of other people, for them to be able to start living their life differently. And we kind of enter into this control mentality of everyone else needs to be living their life a certain way, or I want my partner to be more like this or less like that, or I want my kids to do more of this or that, or I want my colleagues or my boss or my employees or my friends or my students or whatever it might be. And what I find is that Krishna, even as playing the role of God, is saying, I'm not going to force anybody to do anything. The best I can do, and it says, I think, text 25, as the ignorant perform their duty with attachment, results to learn and may similarly act, but without attachment for the sake of leading people on the right path, is a sense of the best thing you can do for other people is to take care of your own business at home, is to make sure that you're in alignment with your values, make sure that you're setting an example, and not even like, okay, I'm doing this and now you're supposed to be doing it also, but like that in and of itself, which I think we read often in the Gita, that becomes a reward in and of itself. And the glow from that will have its natural effect that we can't always control, but it is the best thing that we can really do. And I think that so much of, did we talk? No, I talked about this yesterday with somebody else, about so much of religious and spiritual fanaticism comes from trying to get other people to believe and act in the same way as me, rather than simply worrying about my own self and letting my example do its work in the world.
I really like that. Being a good example for others and not trying to proselytize, convert, push people into doing things that maybe they don't necessarily want to do. And when you enter into any sort of society, I was going to say spiritual society, but like any sort of society, there is a lot of pressure on like, this is what you're supposed to do to be good, and this is what you're supposed to do to be successful, and this is what you're supposed to do to like be a good devotee or like whatever. And I really like that Krishna kind of differentiates here, that two people can be acting in the same way, but one is guided by a higher principle, and therefore that's the highest benefit, right? That's the highest principle, because one is engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna, and the other is engaged for the satisfaction of one's own senses. And I really like this juxtaposition, because a lot of times there are people who think they're setting a good example and think that what they're doing is quote unquote good. And I think people get really caught up in the idea of morality. Morality is such an interesting gray area, in my opinion, because it's these ideas of what is good and what is bad. For some reason I was shown some ad of like some preacher, and it was really interesting, because I was like, wow, this person like really doesn't believe what I believe.
You were showing an ad of a preacher?
Yeah, it was really strange, like on Instagram. And I was like, okay, and I was just kind of going through his stuff, and I was like, wow, this person really doesn't believe what I believe. Actually, they believe like against everything that I believe in. But I thought it was interesting in context of this, like that person 100% believes that they are setting a good example. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I feel like we need to, or at least like that kind of asterisk is like, it must be done for the pleasure of Krishna. That's kind of like my higher principle here, because anything I do, I could just say it's a good example. It's like they're wrong, and all those people are wrong, and their lifestyle is wrong, and whatever. So you shouldn't be like them. That's my good example for all of you. And that's what happens a lot in society. It's like, that's what we're seeing, kind of the extremes of the polarities of like, well, we're right over here, no, we're right over here, no, you're wrong over there, no, we're wrong over there. So I really like that in Bhagavad Gita, and in general in Bhakti, there's always this idea of being guided by a higher principle, of being guided by a superior direction, being guided by the Shastra, by the gurus, by the teachers, by the sadhus. It's like, what are they saying? Because if it's just left up to my own kind of like, this is what I think, it can get into sticky territory there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're raising a good point also about setting an example, because I do think that that could get sticky of like everyone feels like they're setting an example. Anyone who's self-righteous feels like they're setting an example for others. And I think that it maybe if I were to retract a little bit and reassess and rephrase, I think, setting an example, or rather just working on yourself. Like the best thing you can do for others is setting an example, or rephrase, the best thing you do for others is just working on yourself. And it's almost like Krishna is saying, like, you work on yourself, I'll work on others, and don't take responsibility to manage someone else's well-being. Don't take responsibility for correcting someone else's course. Just take responsibility for working on yourself. And what we get from the Gita so much is about this sense of the word detachment is coming up over and over again, of not being attached to the fruits of our actions, to the results of our works, to the outcomes of what happens. And so if I'm setting an example for the sole purpose of trying to change you, that's defeating the point. Then I'm becoming, it just becomes another strategy of manipulation and control. My self-work is actually a strategy for control of others. And I think that what Krishna is saying here is like, that's not what's being put across. Hey, what's a great way to change other people? Set a good example, and then you'll be able to control everybody by the way. Like it's just a form of manipulation. But actually what he's saying is like, ultimately, because the thread through the Gita is that at the end of the day, there's a God in everyone's heart, and it's not you. It's not me. I'm not meant to play that role in other people's lives, but work on yourself and let me work on others. And so I think it's really, when you talk about that person, whoever you saw on Instagram or whatever it is, the real question is, how are you working on yourself? Where are you working on yourself? And the best thing you can do for your partner, for your husband, for your wife, for your boyfriend, for your girlfriend, for your fiance, is work on your own stuff. The best thing you can do for your kids is work on your own stuff. Identify. And if you're not sure, if you don't think there's anything or you don't know, just ask the question, because 100% the people around you know. If you're brave enough and you want to, do it in a way that don't overdo it, because you might hear too much all at once. Is there anything I need to work on? Well, since you haven't asked in 35 years, I do have a few things.
I think that's a super important principle that you brought up right at the end. It's like, ask other people, because I think that when we're left to our own devices, it's easy to just be like, well, I am working on myself. Like, here I am, I'm doing it, and it's like, okay, but has the thing changed, or is the progress being made, or like whatever it is, right? And so I think that that's where the idea of the third party comes in, whether that be the therapist, whether that be the friend, whether that be the parent, whether that be the guru, whether that be the spiritual community. It's like, sometimes we convince ourselves into thinking like, well, yeah, here I am. I'm doing the work. Like, all of these terms get thrown around nowadays. And the staple of kind of society right now is that words start to lose their meaning. And so it's like, well, this person over there is doing the work, air quotes for those that aren't on the live chat. And this person over there, they're also doing the work. So if we're both doing the work, then why aren't we like meeting in the middle here, And so I think it's so important to have that kind of third party, that litmus test of like, am I actually doing the work? Like, is this actually working? Am I actually making progress? And like you said, Dayal, I think it's not all at once, because you're gonna get like a waterfall of things that it's like, well, actually, now that you ask, whatever you're doing is not working.
And it's quite interesting, even, talk about even in a religious context, to jump traditions. Jesus did the same thing. There's the famous conversation that he had with his disciples, and he asked, what do the people say of me? And the people were saying, you're this, you're that. And then he turned to Peter, and it was Peter who said that you are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And it was when Jesus said, they said, what do you think of me? And Peter said that. Peter said, you are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus said, you are the rock. Peter means the rock. And he said, you are the rock on which I'll build my church. And so, there's that example even set there where Jesus was like, what are people saying about me? What do people say about me? And how often do we ask that question? And I think it's also, I think the problem also with that, or one of the dangers, or rather one of the things to keep in mind, is that we also need to make sure that we are asking the right people that question. Because I think that when we live in a world today where everyone is saying that, what happens is people are telling us that without us even asking, on social media and in our online culture. And in one sense, whenever we often post something online, it's our indirect, subtle way of saying, what do you think of me? What do you think of this? And then we internalize that and think that we're, X, Y, and Z. But I think it's really important we sometimes get stressed out because we worry what the wrong people think. And I think it's also important for us to make sure that we are asking that question to the right people who both know us and care about us. Because if you ask that question from somebody who doesn't care about you, their answer may not be helpful. And so I think that it's important to also acknowledge the relationship that Arjuna and Krishna have with each other. Their family, their friends, there's care, there's concern, they know each other. And so for us to make sure that when we ask people around us, that we're also not just that we're asking the right people.
That's why I really don't understand the concept of like getting involved. Not to call anyone out if you've done this. I've done it. I've done it, but
we're going to mention some
rarely.
names very shortly.
Very rarely, because I'm just like, this feels so toxic. Like, I just don't understand the point of like getting into like Facebook comment thread wars or like Reddit thread wars. I'm just like, who cares? Like, these are people that you don't know. Who knows where their opinions are coming from? It's just like this back and forth, and it turns into such a toxic ground. And that just came up for me because you were bringing up this point of like, yeah, we have to hear about ourselves and how we're doing, but from the right people. Right? From the people that are close to us, from the people who really know our context, who really know what's going on with us. Not like Joe Schmo on Facebook making a comment about like, like what I put, like what does that even matter? And it's so interesting because we do let it affect us, and it does get in there somehow. And I think the idea of boundaries is so important, because it's like knowing when to be able to employ them, and when to be able to raise them, and knowing when to be able to like let them down is such a thing that comes with experience and age. And it's just like, it's really important. It's really important, because if I'm thinking about what everyone thinks about me, like I'm gonna drive myself crazy.
Totally. And I think also, there not every comment needs to be responded to. That's a principle for social media, and I think life in general. Like, not every comment needs to be responded to, and I think that, we love, somebody said this to me, what do I say? I'm like, you don't need to say anything, just move on, just let it go. Like, or how do I respond to this comment? Like, you don't, don't even respond. Like, don't pay attention. Don't, just, it is whatever. And so I think that I really appreciate that point a lot, because I do think that I see sometimes that people will mention like somebody said this, and I'm like, but who is that person? Like, why does Death Star /827 account, like, from who knows where, like, matter, like, that they mentioned, like, you are blah 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 blah.
Even on a more personal note, I remember we were doing, you and I you've done it and I've also done it, but like we were getting this like feedback from our roles at the Bhakti Center. And I remember I was meeting with our with the wonderful person, devotee, who kind of handles all of that. And there was this like one piece of feedback where I was just like, I really don't agree with this. Like, I was just like, I don't agree with this like at all, you know, because there's a reason why I'm like this. And I like that I'm like this. And her response was like, great, you don't have to listen to that. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah. She was like, you do not have to take all of this. She was like, this is for you to get an idea and then pick a few things and you can work on them and etc. But she was like, if you feel strongly that that's like a part of you that like makes sense and that like you like and that you're utilizing it for this reason, then great, you don't have to listen to that piece of feedback. And it was such a like breath of fresh air. I was like, yeah, I don't have to listen to it, you know. It's like, this is a part of me that I like and this is the reason why I do that, and so I'm going to keep doing it, you know. And if that
Yeah.
person doesn't like it, you know, sorry. Not
Did you get
everyone
my
has to like
feedback? I did, and I dismissed it.
I think this idea that like everyone has to like you at all times is just so like unhealthy. You know, it's like sometimes people are going to be annoyed or be frustrated or they're not going to like something you do, and it's okay. And if it turns into a bigger issue, and if it's like something like whatever, then of course like, okay, let's come into conversation, let's talk about it and whatever. But it's like, you know, that speaks more about them than it does about you. And if I'm
Yeah.
trying to constantly control like how people think of me, that's that's too much.
Yeah. Um, I also in a similar vein, like we've started like feedback forms at the Bhakti Center that we send out our newsletters, we post on the wall that people can get feedback. And when people submit feedback, they could submit it anonymously, or they can submit it with their name and contact information if they want us to get back to them. Like they can submit, like, is this a complaint? Is this feedback? Is this a suggestion, an observation? And like, do you want us to respond? And there's some feedback that comes in and they don't leave a name, they don't leave a contact information, you know, or maybe they'll leave a name, but they don't leave contact information. So it's like, they didn't make any indication that we want us to respond in any way.
Mm,
And then I read the feedback, it'll be like, well, this is what we should do, or this, that, or the other. And then our HR person is just like, you don't have to respond. Like they didn't leave any information. Like not every piece of feedback requires a response.
mm.
And I was like, oh, okay. Well, then good to know. I'll take that, incorporate that into, you know, however I want to, or however we can, and let that inform the way we move forward. But it's not that every comment, every statement, you know, warrants or requires a response or engagement
Mm.
or justification. Um, and so I think that because otherwise what happens is that we're no longer moving through life on our own. We're just simply responding to everything that comes up.
Mm.
My life is just simply a response to the stimuli, to the onslaught, to the just
Rush.
barrage of just what's coming my way. And we don't have to do that. Like we just really don't have to do that. We don't have to be rude. We don't have to be callous. We don't have to be flippant. We don't have
Mm,
to be dismissive.
mm,
We don't have to be inhumane, but we also don't have to we don't have to respond to unsolicited advice,
mm,
unsolicited feedback. And even when we ask for feedback, we're not necessarily agreeing that I'm going to be able to incorporate everything you say into my life. And so this all stemmed from the question of like, how am I working on myself?
mm,
And you know, the question is, you know, you can ask people, but make sure you're asking the right people. And you get to choose what you're able to work on and what you feel needs to be worked on. Because sometimes people's inputs, our assessment of you is a reflection of what's going on in their life.
mhm,
You know what I mean? And or sometimes what people think you should work on or how they want you to be different is based off the role, the supporting role they want you to play in their life.
mhm,
You know, you should be more X, Y, and Z because it's affecting my life in X, Y, and Z. And so So it's important for us to just kind of take all of that into context. And at the end of the day, that's what Krishna is mentioning here, bringing it back to the Gita, is this idea of we all have something to work on, and we all have, we all owe it to ourselves to do the right thing in our life, rather than trying to control and manipulate the way other people are living their life.
Yeah, I love that. We all have something to work on is a nice reminder. And also it's all gonna look very different. And so the way that I might be working on the same exact thing that you might be working on is gonna look very different. And so we're all so unique and going through our own personal journeys. And as long as the desire in the heart is to come closer to Krishna, or come closer to that higher sense of self, then we're on the right path, And so this idea of like, oh, well, my healing isn't looking as good as Kimberly's healing over there, I must be doing something wrong, It's like
nobody's healing is looking as good as Kimberly's healing. She's killing it. She's killing it.
And it's like we're constantly in this, this measuring. They say that the word Maya, another translation of Maya or illusion, is to measure. And so we're just measuring ourselves up against like, oh, they're doing better than me, or I'm doing less than them, or they're bigger, or they're this, or they're that, or they're whatever. And it's like, no, it's a different process, and it's going to look differently for everyone. But as long as that higher principle of Krishna is in our heart, then it's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. Well, thank you for all those beautiful thoughts and discussion. We are out of time here for today. And Kimberly, are you back on track with our takeaways? You settled there in Florida? You gonna wrap it up for us?
Yeah. I'm ready to wrap it up again.
She's ready to wrap it up again.
Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So we're taking away that the best thing we can do for others is to set a good example by engaging for Krishna's satisfaction. We can work on ourselves and let Krishna work on others. A good litmus test to understand our progress is to ask the right questions to the right people. And don't respond to that Facebook comment. Not every piece of feedback requires engagement. Thank you.
Some good practical stuff in there. Kishore, what you walking away with?
I'm really walking away with just that last point. I really like that whole feedback conversation, that not every opinion, not everything that everyone, not every single tiny thing that other people think about me, or every piece of feedback needs to be responded to. And something I'm walking away with also is that, like, I'm in charge of my life, I'm in charge of the decisions that I make. And sometimes we move into this mode of like trying to please others, or trying to manage or control the way that others view me. And it's like that almost arrests us from making a conscious choice or making a conscious decision. And so I always have to remind myself that I'm choosing, I'm making choices to elicit boundaries, to take them down, to be in communion with others, to listen to someone's opinion, to not listen to someone's opinion as such. So yeah, I'm walking away with that today.
I love what Kimberly mentioned, asking the right questions to the right people. Yeah, like not close, and the longer you the less you do it, the more hard it is to like start, because we get used to just kind of being isolated and closed off, and not letting people in or not reaching out. And then there's more that gets stuffed away that's harder to kind of like, where do I start? And so I think that it is important, and I recognize the challenge of it, but I just think that asking the right questions, the right people about how I'm doing, is that just making sure that I'm not just flying solo all the time, is an important one for sure. And yeah, not responding to every comment. If you got feedback for us, let us know. We may or may not listen to it. We may or may not respond to it. And we may or may not even let you know we received it. But you're always welcome to share. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Please take care. Please be well. And we look forward to seeing you next time, same place. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.